What if the most powerful plants for your heart and your arteries were not invented by modern medicine? What if they were growing in your grandmother's garden long before the statin aisle existed? I am Barbara O'Reilly, 43 years an herbalist and 60-some notebooks to show for it. These are not folk superstitions. They are plants with named compounds and real clinical research behind them. And today I am walking you through 20 of them. Number 11 on this list gave the pharmaceutical industry its most famous product, and then the original disappeared. And the plant I am saving for last is still prescribed by doctors in Germany for heart conditions, while most American physicians have never heard of it. Here are 20 forgotten plants that will support your arteries and your circulation, ranked from remarkable to absolutely extraordinary. Number 1. Garlic, the bulb they cannot patent. You already have this one in your kitchen right now. In clinical trials, garlic supplementation has been associated with modest reductions in blood pressure, lower LDL cholesterol, and reduced triglycerides. The compound behind those results is called allicin, a sulfur molecule that forms only when you crush or chop the clove. Here is the traditional method. You crush it, you wait about 10 minutes for the allicin to build, and then you use it. Heat destroys the enzyme that creates allicin, which is why the old way was always chop first and cook later. The ancient world already knew. Egyptian laborers were given garlic rations while building the pyramids. Greek athletes ate it before competition. In both world wars, when drug supplies ran short, battlefield medics packed raw garlic into wounds and called it Russian penicillin. Nobody banned garlic. Nobody needed to. You cannot patent a bulb that grows in every garden on earth. No company ever funded the research that would have put it on a pharmacy shelf. Garlic never got forgotten, but we forgot it was medicine. If you are on warfarin or aspirin, you should know that garlic has real antiplatelet activity, and those effects add up. It has been sitting on your cutting board this whole time, doing more than you ever gave it credit for. One quick thing before I continue. You can buy the right plant, use the right amount, and still get nothing from it because of something you do in the last 5 minutes in your own kitchen. Nobody explains that part. I will tell you where I wrote it down at the end of the video. Number 2. Ginger, the root that outlasted the Roman Empire. Ginger appears in the medical writings of Dioscorides in the 1st century, and it has not left the record since. 19th century American physicians prescribed it to settle the stomach, curb nausea, and induce sweating, continuing a line of use that stretched back more than 2,000 years without breaking. Here is where the modern research landed. The active compounds gingerol and shogol have been tested in randomized controlled trials. A meta-analysis across 6 of those trials found ginger associated with a reduction of about 6 points in systolic blood pressure. A separate trial in 70 people with type 2 diabetes showed significant reductions in fasting, blood sugar, triglycerides, and total cholesterol. The proposed mechanism involves improved arterial elasticity and increased activity of the receptors that pull LDL out of the blood. You steep it as a tea, chew a slice of the fresh root, or grate it straight into food. The preparation is the plant itself. Ginger was never formally banned or delisted. It was simply displaced. The synthetic arrived, and nobody looked back. Just be aware, ginger has a mild blood-thinning effect and can lower blood sugar. If you take warfarin or diabetes medication, those effects compound. 3,000 years of medicine, still in your produce aisle, still waiting for someone to take it seriously again. Number 3. Beetroot, the root that works harder on older blood vessels. Your grandmother probably kept a row of beets in the garden and canned or pickled them every fall. What she called a blood builder, the science now calls something different, but both were talking about the same root for the same reason. Beetroot is rich in dietary nitrate, which the body converts into nitric oxide, a molecule that relaxes and widens blood vessels. Here is what most people walk right past. Nitric oxide production declines with age, and that decline is part of why blood pressure tends to climb as you get older. In a crossover study comparing younger adults to older adults over 50, the older group showed a greater increase in the active compound and a greater reduction in blood pressure from beet juice. A separate study found beet juice reduced blood pressure by roughly 7 points in older adults. In the 16th century, pale and anemic people were given beets specifically to rebuild the blood. Then somewhere along the way, beets became just a vegetable, and the medicine vanished from the conversation. You can juice it raw, roast it, or eat it pickled. The nitrate holds up across preparations. Beetroot may turn your urine pink. That is harmless, and it affects about 1 in 10 people. If you have a history of calcium oxalate kidney stones, keep your intake moderate. The root your grandmother pickled was doing what she always said it would. Number 4. Dandelion. The weed that used to be medicine. It grows in every lawn, every driveway crack, every vacant lot in the country. You have pulled this plant out of the ground 1,000 times. And until 1965, it was officially listed as a medicine in the United States National Formulary. I need to show you something about my shelf, because I collect old drug references, 19th century dispensatories, old editions of the United States Pharmacopoeia and the National Formulary. I own them, and I have read them. One of those books has a page listing every medicine they decided to erase, and Dandelion is on that page. Here is what King's American Dispensatory wrote about the dried root before they removed it. It possesses, and these are the exact words, but little medicinal virtue. In animal studies, dandelion polysaccharides reduce triglycerides and LDL while raising HDL. No human cardiovascular trial exists yet, but the diuretic effect is confirmed at the human level, and the traditional uses for liver and kidney support reach back centuries across cultures. You steep the root as tea, or eat the young leaves fresh in a salad. They did not forget dandelion. They reclassified it. They turned a listed medicine into a lawn weed, and most people never noticed the switch. The stems carry a milky latex, so if you have ragweed or daisy family allergies, handle it carefully. If you take lithium, dandelion can raise your levels, and it may compound the effect of prescription diuretics or blood pressure medications. The weed never left your driveway. You just stopped seeing what it was. Number 5. Celery, the seed the pharmacy dismissed. Same book, same kind of entry. The 1926 United States Dispensatory carried a full monograph on celery, official preparations, recommended forms, the works. And in that same entry, they wrote this: "There is not the slightest reason to ascribe any therapeutic virtue to the drug." They printed the recipe and the insult on the same page. Here is what they missed. A compound in celery seed acts as a calcium channel blocker, the same class of mechanism used in modern blood pressure medications. A triple-blind crossover trial tested a standardized celery seed extract and found it reduced both systolic and diastolic blood pressure over 4 to 6 weeks. The traditional preparation is a seed decoction, celery seeds steeped in hot water and strained, used for joint pain and gout across cultures. Celery was not banned, it was dismissed so thoroughly that nobody even argued. Here is what matters if you are on medication. Celery has a moderate interaction with warfarin, and celery seed supplements have been flagged in case reports for interfering with thyroid medication. The vegetable on your plate is not the concern. It is the concentrated seed form that needs attention. It is like having a blood pressure prescription hiding in your garden, behind a vegetable nobody thought to take seriously. Number 6. Parsley, the garnish that used to be medicine. Same book, same kind of entry, but this one had a dissenting voice. Chapman, writing in the same dispensatory, had a different opinion. I know of no diuretic more valuable in certain cases. The general entry called Parsley a feeble carminative and an adjuvant, praise and dismissal on the same page. Parsley is high in folate, a B vitamin that helps lower homocysteine, and elevated homocysteine is epidemiologically associated with higher vascular risk. You steep the leaves or root as a tea, or you eat it fresh by the handful, not the 2 sprigs left on a plate and thrown away. Parsley was not banned. It was scraped off the plate, and the medicine went with it. This is the warning that matters most in this part of the list. Parsley is very high in vitamin K, which directly opposes warfarin. If you suddenly increase your intake, especially juiced or in large amounts, it can reduce warfarin's effectiveness and throw off your levels. The guidance is not avoidance. It is consistency. Keep your intake steady and loop in your pharmacist before you change it. Think of it as a medicine cabinet hiding behind the one thing on the plate nobody eats. Number 7. Rosemary. The oil the pharmacopoeia standardized, then dismissed. The United States Pharmacopoeia once carried rosemary oil as an official drug with a measured purity assay, testing for specific compound concentrations the way any pharmaceutical would be tested. It was classified as a stimulant and a rubefacient. Then the dispensatory reduced it to a footnote. Rosemary oil was principally employed, however, in perfumery. They tested it, confirmed it met specifications, and handed it to the perfume counter. The laboratory caught up eventually. The compounds rosmarinic acid, carnosic acid, and carnosol have been shown in cell studies to activate the same glucose uptake pathway that some diabetes medications target. The German government approved rosemary leaf for conditions including high blood pressure. You grow it in a pot or in the garden. You steep a sprig as tea or work it into food. The preparation has not changed in centuries. Rosemary never got forgotten. It got reclassified from nervous system stimulant to potato seasoning, and nobody questioned the demotion. At culinary amounts, rosemary is perfectly safe. At supplement or essential oil doses, it can thin the blood and interact with warfarin, aspirin, and blood pressure medications. The oil they standardized is still growing on your windowsill. It never stopped being what the old book said it was. Number 8. Cinnamon. Dropped by the pharmacopoeia, kept by every grocery store. There are 2 kinds of cinnamon, and the pharmacopoeia chose between them. The 9th revision of the United States Pharmacopoeia officially recognized Saigon cinnamon. But cassia, the variety most Americans actually have in their cabinet, was dropped from officials standing around the turn of the last century. The species your kitchen uses every day is the exact one the pharmacy walked away from. The old dispensatory called cinnamon warm, carminative, and astringent, used as a powder stirred into food, or steeped as tea for nausea and digestive complaints. It was also described as chiefly used as an adjuvant, never the main act. Modern research on cinnamon and blood sugar is genuinely mixed, with some meta-analyses showing significant reductions in fasting glucose, triglycerides, and LDL cholesterol, while others show no meaningful effect. The honest framing is that cinnamon is associated with improvement in some studies, not all. Cinnamon never got forgotten. We just forgot it was ever more than a flavor. What matters about your cabinet is this. Cassia carries roughly 100 times more coumarin than Ceylon cinnamon, and coumarin at daily high intake can stress the liver. Occasional cooking is fine. For daily use, choose Ceylon. The pharmacopoeia picked its favorite and walked away from yours, and nobody mentioned the difference. Number 9. Cayenne Pepper. The spice rack's forgotten stimulant. In the early 1800s, Samuel Thompson built his entire system of herbal medicine around cayenne as a circulation stimulant. He believed it could equalize blood flow, warm cold extremities, and speed every other remedy through the body. Over a century later, Jethro Kloss called it the most valuable herb in the vegetable kingdom. The United States Pharmacopoeia listed capsicum as an official stimulant and rubefacient. Today, capsaicin is recognized only as a topical, arthritis creams, and pain patches. The internal circulatory use the old pharmacopoeia listed has been dropped entirely. The science tracked down what Thomson was seeing. Capsaicin binds to the heat receptor in artery walls, and in a study of more than 9,000 people, it was associated with a lower risk of hypertension. It also inhibits platelet clotting, the same mechanism behind aspirin's blood-thinning effect. You shake it onto food. That is the whole preparation. Cayenne never got forgotten as a spice. It got forgotten as medicine, and the pharmacopoeia's stimulant became pizza seasoning. If you take warfarin or aspirin, capsaicin at supplement doses can increase bleeding risk. If you take blood pressure medication like lisinopril, cayenne can worsen the dry cough those drugs sometimes cause. Think of it as the circulation remedy that never left the table. It just got mistaken for a condiment. Number 10. Turmeric. Judged guilty by its own color. The ancient world had a system called the doctrine of signatures. If a plant was yellow, it treated yellow conditions. Turmeric was prescribed for jaundice on that logic alone. Wrong reasoning, right plant. I have the 1918 United States Dispensatory on my shelf. Here is what it says about turmeric. Its medicinal action was purely imaginary, and it was employed only to impart color to ointments. They reduced a plant central to Indian medicine for thousands of years to an ointment dye. The compound is curcumin, with documented anti-inflammatory and antioxidant activity associated with arterial health support. But curcumin alone is nearly useless because the body barely absorbs it. Piperine, the compound in black pepper, raises curcumin absorption by up to 20-fold. Traditional Indian cooking has always paired the two, and modern research took decades to confirm what the kitchen already knew. You stir the powder into food or steep it as tea, always alongside black pepper. They dismissed a medicine they had never studied from a tradition they had never consulted. If you are on warfarin, aspirin, or diabetes medication, curcumin at supplement doses can thin the blood or lower blood sugar. It is like having a locked pharmacy on your spice rack, and the key was in the pepper grinder the whole time. And if you are starting to see the pattern here, do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe if you have not already. It helps this video find the next person searching for these same answers. We are just getting to the ones that will surprise you most. Number 11. White willow bark. The plant that became aspirin. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning. The plant that gave the industry its most famous product and then vanished from medicine entirely. Same book I showed you with the turmeric entry. Same 1918 dispensatory. Same shelf. It says that willow bark is at present never employed in regular medicine. Less than 20 years after the patent, the source plant was declared obsolete. Here is what happened. A chemist isolated the compound salicin from willow bark in 1828. By the 1890s, researchers at Bayer had synthesized a derivative. On March 6, 1899, they patented aspirin, and by 1918, the bark itself was finished. But Hippocrates described chewing willow bark for pain and fever in the 5th century, and Assyrian medical tablets name it centuries earlier still. The traditional preparation was to steep the bark as tea or chew it raw. Thousands of years of use, displaced by its own synthetic descendant in a single generation. Willow bark was not forgotten. It was made obsolete by the thing it created. Salicin works through the same anticoagulant mechanism as aspirin. Do not combine willow bark with aspirin, warfarin, or any blood thinner. The best-selling drug on the pharmacy shelf started as bark from a tree by the creek. The tree is still standing. Nobody mentions that part. Number 12. Green tea. The tea the empire replaced. Before the mid-1800s, most tea sold in London was Chinese green tea. By 1879, China still held 70% of the London market. 20 years later, that share had collapsed to 10%, driven out by Indian and Ceylonese black teas, backed by colonial trade routes. Green tea was not regulated away, it was commercially outcompeted. Chinese and Japanese medicine had been using green tea for the heart long before any Western study existed. The key compound is a polyphenol called epigallocatechin gallate, and it supports nitric oxide production in the walls of blood vessels. What the cohort studies found is striking. In large Japanese populations, drinking 5 or more cups a day was associated with a 26% lower risk of death from heart attack or stroke. A separate cohort found 2 cups a day linked to a 22 to 33% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. You steep the leaves in hot water. The preparation has not changed. Green tea was never banned. It was pushed aside by a colonial product, and nobody in the West asked what they had lost. Caffeine can interact with blood pressure medications. Concentrated supplements of the key polyphenol have been flagged for liver stress, but brewed tea is not the concern. Drink it between meals to avoid interference with iron absorption. The tea they replaced is still on the grocery shelf. It never stopped working. Number 13. Hibiscus. The tea flavor with a blood pressure secret. If you drank red zinger tea in the 1970s, you already know this plant. Celestial Seasonings launched it in January of 1972, and hibiscus was the main ingredient. Most people had no idea what was in that cup. Across West Africa, the Caribbean, and Mexico, dried hibiscus calices have been steeped as a remedy for high blood pressure for generations. In Mexico, it is agua de Jamaica. In Jamaica, it is sorrel. In Sudan, carcadi. 3 continents, 3 names, 1 traditional use that predates every modern blood pressure drug by centuries. The modern research confirms what all 3 traditions observed. A meta-analysis of 17 randomized controlled trials found hibiscus tea associated with a systolic blood pressure reduction of about 7 points. The mechanism involves the same enzyme target that prescription drugs like captopril and lisinopril block, the same site, just milder. You steep the dried calices in hot water. That is the preparation everywhere it is used. Hibiscus was displaced. When captopril received approval in 1981, the pharmaceutical alternative became the standard of care. Nobody forgot the tea, but the entire country forgot it was a blood pressure remedy, and nobody stopped to ask what the cup was actually doing. If you take prescription blood pressure medication, hibiscus adds to the effect. That combination can push pressure too low. You may have been drinking the remedy your whole life without knowing what it was doing for you. Number 14. Red clover. The lawnweed pharmacists used to bottle. You probably sucked the nectar from these blossoms as a child. That purple-pink globe in every meadow and uncut yard was a pharmacy product. Park Davis, now part of Pfizer, commercially sold a preparation called syrup trifolium, and red clover was a listed ingredient. It appeared in the National Formulary in 1926 and 1936 as a blood purifier. The isoflavones in red clover, biochanin A, and forminonetin have been studied in 12 randomized trials across nearly 1,300 peri- and postmenopausal women. The results showed significant reductions in total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides, with a small rise in HDL. A separate trial found improved arterial flexibility, which matters for this audience specifically. You harvest the flower heads from clean ground and steep them dried as a tea. Children already know part of this. They have been pulling sweetness from the blossom for generations. Nobody can patent a meadow flower. The funding dried up, the pharmacy product vanished, and the plant became a lawnweed again. Red clover contains phytoestrogens, so use caution if you are on hormone therapy or have a hormone-sensitive condition. It also carries a mild blood-thinning effect from its coumarin content, relevant if you take warfarin. Think of it as your childhood candy flower, with a pharmacy receipt that most people have never seen. Number 15. Flaxseed. The seed that wrapped mummies and reduces blood pressure. Its Latin name means the most useful, and the ancient world agreed. Hippocrates recommended it for intestinal complaints. Charlemagne may have ordered its cultivation by law. For thousands of years, flax was a food, a fiber, and a medicine at once. Then someone split it into two identities. The same plant became linseed oil in the hardware store and flaxseed on the health food shelf. The medicine disappeared into an industrial product, and most people never connected the two names to the same seed. The strongest trial enrolled 110 patients with peripheral artery disease and followed them for a full year on daily ground flaxseed. LDL cholesterol dropped 15% in the first month. Systolic blood pressure was reduced by 10 points and diastolic by 7 at 6 months. The lead investigator called it the largest blood pressure decrease ever demonstrated by a dietary intervention. You grind the seed and stir it into food or water. Whole seeds pass through undigested, so grinding is the step that unlocks everything. Flaxseed was not banned. It was renamed, reclassified, and filed under paint thinner, while the same seed sat on a different shelf with a different label. Flaxseed can slow the absorption of oral medications. Take it at a different time from your prescriptions. It is like having a 6,000-year-old prescription written into the food supply, and nobody reads the label anymore. Number 16. Pomegranate. The fruit 3 ancient empires called medicine. The Ebers Papyrus mentions it 1,500 years before the Common Era. Ayurvedic physicians treated the whole pomegranate tree as what they called an excellent pharmacopoeia in itself: seeds, flowers, rind, and root bark, each part serving a different purpose across dozens of conditions. Persian, Chinese, and Islamic medical traditions all documented it specifically for the heart and the arteries. None of that survived the trip to your supermarket. What arrived is a juice aisle label with no memory of what the fruit used to be. One of the longest dietary intervention trials on arterial health followed patients with carotid artery narrowing who drank pomegranate juice daily for 3 years. The thickness of the artery wall was reduced by up to 30%, and blood pressure reduced by 21% in the first year. You eat the seeds, drink the juice, or use the concentrate. The form matters less than the habit. Pomegranate was never banned. It was stripped of a medical tradition that stretches across 3 ancient civilizations and given a trending label instead. If you take warfarin, pomegranate can affect your clotting time. Talk to your doctor before adding it regularly. You are holding a fruit that Persia, India, and Egypt all called a pharmacy. The grocery store calls it a superfood and leaves it at that. Number 17. Ginseng, America's first export medicine. Before this country had a constitution, it had a ginseng trade. In 1784, the Empress of China sailed from New York to Canton, carrying over 3,000 pounds of American ginseng root. It was the first American trade voyage to China, and the cargo was a plant dug by hand from Appalachian soil. Between 1821 and 1899, the country exported an average of 190 tons of ginseng every year. Daniel Boone dug it from the wilderness along the Ohio River. George Washington's diary records encountering ginseng traders in the Virginia mountains. This was not a curiosity. It was a founding commodity. That root is in my books too. The United States Pharmacopoeia listed ginseng for 40 years, from 1842 to 1882, and then removed it. In 1975, it was placed on a federal trade restriction list due to over-harvesting and has required a government permit to export ever since. The active compounds, ginsenosides, are associated with improved blood sugar regulation and reduced cardiovascular risk factors. You steep the dried root as tea or chew it raw. Appalachian families still dig it by hand today. Nobody can patent a root that grows wild in the forest. It lost its pharmacy listing and gained a permit. This warning runs in the opposite direction from the others. American ginseng reduces warfarin's effect, meaning it increases clotting rather than thinning the blood. If you are on a blood thinner, that distinction matters. America's first medicine before it was America's first export. Most Americans have never held one in their hand. Number 18, horse chestnut, the lucky charm that turned out to be medicine. You probably remember picking these up as a child. Glossy brown seeds in spiky pods, collected by the pocketful every autumn. In England, they played conker games with them. Nobody told you these seeds contain a compound called acin, studied in trials involving more than 10,000 patients. In Germany, a standardized horse chestnut extract is an approved medicine for venous circulation problems, leg swelling, heaviness, varicose veins. It is a regulated drug there. In the United States, the raw plant is classified as unsafe by the FDA, and the extract never crossed over. Here is what this item is honestly about. Horse chestnut supports circulation in the veins and capillaries, the return flow. That is not the same as cleaning an artery, and I will not pretend it is. But for anyone dealing with leg swelling or poor lower body circulation, this is one of the most studied natural options available. The preparation warning matters here. The raw seed, leaf, and bark are toxic. Only the standardized extract with the toxic compound removed and the acin concentrated is safe. Do not prepare this one at home. If you are on a blood thinner, acin has mild anticoagulant activity. Horse chestnut never got forgotten in Germany, but it got forgotten on the way to America, and nobody carried the approval across the border. Think of it as the playground toy that turned out to be a regulated medicine in one country. In another, nobody studied it at all. Number 19, Arjuna. The heart remedy the law erased. You have never heard this name, and there is a reason for that. Arjuna is a tree whose bark has been prescribed for heart conditions since the Atharva Veda named it thousands of years ago. The classical physician Vagbhata described its cardiac use in the oldest surviving medical texts. It has been in continuous practice in India ever since. Then the colonial administration arrived. The Bombay Medical Registration Act of 1912 disqualified every practitioner not trained exclusively in Western biomedicine. The acts that followed described Ayurveda as irrational and superstitious and made traditional medical practice effectively illegal. A 3,000-year system was legislated out of standing, not because it failed, but because the law redefined who counts as a doctor. The bark contains triterpenoid compounds, arginolic acid and arjunic acid, along with flavonoids and antioxidants. In a double-blind crossover trial, Arjuna bark extract was tested head-to-head against a standard pharmaceutical in 58 men with chronic stable angina. The traditional preparation is bark steeped as a decoction or used in a fermented Ayurvedic tonic. If you take blood pressure medication, Arjuna adds to the effect and may push pressure too low. It also has mild antiplatelet activity. Older than Western medicine itself, erased not by evidence, but by a line drawn through the word doctor. Number 20, Hawthorn. The heart medicine hiding in your yard. This is the one I saved for last. You have seen this plant 1,000 times. A thorny shrub or small tree, common across North America, covered in white flowers every spring, and clusters of bright red berries by autumn. Most people see landscaping. Most American physicians have never prescribed it. And in Germany, Hawthorn has been an approved medicine for the heart since 1984. Here is the full record. Hawthorn entered American clinical practice by 1896. Physicians used it for heart conditions and as a companion to digitalis. Then, during the 1930s, it faded from use as part of a broader wave of botanicals dropped from the official books. American medicine moved on, German medicine did not. On March 1, 1984, the German Commission E approved Hawthorn for supporting heart function in early-stage decline. The approval was reviewed and reaffirmed in 1994. In October of 2014, the European Medicines Agency adopted a formal herbal monograph. Today, Hawthorn is an official drug in the pharmacopoeias of Brazil, China, France, Germany, Hungary, Russia, and Switzerland. The most studied preparation is a standardized extract tested across more than 4,000 patients. It demonstrated increased heart muscle contractility, reduced resistance in the peripheral blood vessels, improved coronary blood flow, and improved ejection fraction, the percentage of blood your heart pushes out with each beat. The berries contain flavonoids, including vitexin, hypericide, and rutin, alongside proanthocyanidins and triterpenic acids. And that book I showed you, the one with the page of removed medicines? Hawthorn is not on any page. It was never officially listed in America, never formally dismissed. It simply never made it in. You steep the dried berries as tea or take the standardized extract. That is both the traditional and the modern preparation. Hawthorn was not erased by a dismissal, it was erased by an absence. Nobody wrote the bad sentence about it, they just never wrote the good one. This is the most important warning in this entire list. If you take digoxin, Hawthorn adds to the effect and can interfere with digoxin blood tests. If you take beta blockers or calcium channel blockers, it amplifies the lowering of blood pressure and heart rate. And if you take nitrates, do not combine them. Both widen blood vessels, and the drop in pressure can be dangerous. Anyone on cardiac medication needs to tell their cardiologist before they touch Hawthorn in any form. It is not a berry bush. It is the cardiac medicine 7 countries approved and America never brought home, and it has been growing in the hedge at the end of the driveway this entire time. 20 plants. Not one invented in a laboratory. Every single one growing within reach of where you are right now. The people who used these plants were not primitive. They were paying attention. Generation after generation, they watched what happened to the people who used them, and they wrote it down. My grandmother brought her remedies from County Clare and grew half of this list by the back step. The women in the Ozarks kept the same records. The herbalists across Appalachia arrived at the same plants, working from different kitchens, reaching the same conclusions. Garlic reduces blood pressure. Beetroot widens blood vessels. Willow bark became the best-selling drug on earth. Pomegranate reduced the thickness of the artery wall over 3 years. And Hawthorn is a government-approved heart medicine in 7 countries that most American doctors cannot name. They were not guessing, they were observing. And modern science keeps arriving at the same answers they reached centuries ago. Sometimes the most powerful medicine is not in a pharmacy. Sometimes it has been growing in the hedge at the end of the driveway your entire life. One last thing before you go, because knowing all of this and doing nothing with it is just entertainment. The difference between a real medicinal plant and a dried supermarket imitation matters more than most people think. The garlic powder in a plastic jar is not the same as a fresh clove you crush and let sit for 10 minutes. The turmeric capsule without piperine is not the same as the spice paired with black pepper the way Indian cooking has always done it. How you source these plants and how you prepare them is the whole difference between a remedy and a label. Everything I trust is linked in the description. The Dooryard Almanac is down there too, if you want the long version of every plant on this list. Now tell me which one got you. Are you team garlic and ginger? Team willow bark and aspirin? Team hawthorn? The one hiding in the yard this whole time? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. And a comment from you pushes this video in front of the next person who has been wondering the same thing you were half an hour ago. You would be doing that for a stranger, and that matters. Subscribe if it was worth your time. New one coming every week. Then pick one plant off this list and go find the real version this week. Just one. That is how it starts.